Hi, my name is Stephanie, and I'd like to welcome you all to our webinar today, Success with ServiceNow Service Portal. A few notes before we start. Your phone lines are muted, so any questions you have for the presenters, please use the Q&A panel, and please address them to all presenters. That will help me field those and get those to the right person. Also, you will receive an email from me, well, actually from ReadyTalk, from me, with both the recording and the slides, and hopefully we'll get that out to you later today, definitely by tomorrow. And lastly, Jeff is doing a demo later on, so you may want to find the full screen mode now on your ReadyTalk conference controls. That will give you a much better view when Jeff jumps into the portal and does his demo. At this point, I'd like to turn it over to Don Casson, CEO of Evergreen. Don?
Thank you, Stephanie. Hello, this is Don Casson, CEO of Evergreen, and with me is Jeff Benedict, who heads up Evergreen's ITSM practice and leads our innovation efforts. Jeff and I would like to wish all of you a happy upcoming holiday season. Already ahead of my slides. Okay. If you're new to our series, welcome. Thanks for joining us. If you're a past attendee, thanks for coming back. Our goal, as always, is to share valuable information and insights you can use in your planning and activities today. The topic we'll explore today is success with ServiceNow's Service Portal. After a very little bit about Evergreen, we'll dive right into it. Beyond that, we will briefly demonstrate our always evolving view of a very advanced self-service portal and catalog, which is built on ServiceNow Service Portal. And Jeff will walk through some of the concepts discussed today in that demonstration. After that, we'll answer questions if you have any. Evergreen is a US-based consulting firm. We've worked with hundreds of mid-market, Fortune 1000 companies and public sector organizations to improve their service management execution. Over the past 20 years, we are 20 years old this year. We've delivered more than 4,000 IT service management projects. Sounds like a lot. We are a full lifecycle firm. We have both process and technology consulting in the same company. We are one of a few top-tier or gold U.S. ServiceNow partners in services, application development, and training. As a certified applications developer, we actually develop solutions on the platform which must be built and tested to the same standards that ServiceNow uses themselves. We hope, or we believe, that the benefit to our clients is better quality. As we talk with our ServiceNow customers, they tell us that this is their biggest problem, meeting their ServiceNow demand. They say demand exceeds resources, but it can have peaks and valleys too. Skilled resources are scarce. It takes 6 to 12 months to become capable, and then perhaps they get hired away. Also, we may not have a true solution architect to lead us. When our people need help, where can they turn? How do we even know if we're doing the right things? And even with expensive consultants, contracts, task orders, and invoicing are still a lot of work. We educate those consultants on our business, then they're gone. This is how most try to handle this. A core internal ServiceNow team augmented by outside consultants on a project-by-project basis and possible offshore technical support. We are so used to doing it this way that we may not stop. We may not even stop to think how hard and inefficient this actually is. We think the traditional service approach is broken. We created Evergreen Evolve to fix it. There's a huge amount of waste in project-based activity that neither of us benefit from. Due to scheduling issues, it's hard for us to get resources billable more than 70-75% of the time, so 25% gets wasted. We have a saying in consulting, which usually gets a laugh, but I won't be able to hear you if you do, that the first project with the correct scope is the second one. So another 15 to 20% can get lost in risk allowance to account for these scope issues, an astounding total of 40 to 45% that can be wasted. This is why the going market rate for services is so high. Evergreen Evolve is different. It's a part of a full-time team of senior implementation certified ServiceNow experts specifically dedicated to you over a 6-month period. So our team and your team become one team. You get dedicated U.S. thought leadership and our engagement managers and senior solutions architects who work closely with our offshore team of dedicated senior certified developers. Evolve gives you one flexible contract to help you meet up to all of your tactical and strategic ServiceNow demand. Because it captures the huge amount of waste, we can pass the savings on to you. Best of all, there is no long-term lock-in. You can cancel an Evolve contract at any time with just 30 days notice. Since this is our last webinar of 2017, I thought it might be fun to make it sort of a highlights reel, the best of the year, covering core topics that together create a great service portal solution. Success with ServiceNow Service Portal begins with the customer. We recommend thinking customer in rather than IT out. If it's not good for them, then it's not good. Excuse me. When we begin to think from the customer in, this is the place to start. What do they want? They only want two things: a great customer experience and for us to meet our promises. In fact, those are our KPIs. It's clear how Amazon does this. Most of us are Amazon customers, so we live this experience. Now, as an aside, a comment I often hear when working with clients is this: hey, we're not like Amazon, they're just selling products. We are delivering complex IT services. It sounds good, but it's not true. Amazon, through Amazon Web Services, provides IT infrastructure, networking, servers, databases, analytics, and applications, all as a service. They provide more of this than the largest Fortune 100 company by a factor of 10,000. So they are actually doing what we're doing, which is good for us to understand. Thinking customer-centric. What are the design principles for a good experience? We studied the leading modern customer experience companies and came up with these 5. Simple. That means as simple as possible for the customer, removing everything not necessary at that very point in time. Beautiful means beautiful in appearance, but more importantly, a beautiful customer experience end to end. Complete. That means everything the customer needs at that point in time is there. That's complete. Now you can say simple and complete are actually in conflict, which is great because good design is refined in conflict. It's the balance of trade-offs. Predictive is that little extra that you might be interested in. It is thinking ahead for the customer. If you're buying a stereo receiver on Amazon, here are some cables you might need. Leading means never leaving the customer lost in the experience, up or out every step of the way. At Evergreen, we use these design principles every day in our work to build outcomes that customers love. Our first best practice is to start by building a beautiful customer service portal. What you want is to build a customer-centric service experience reflecting the 5 design principles, or those set of principles that you decide matter for you, in a complete end-to-end solution. If you don't want to build it yourselves, you can use the Evergreen Self-Service Portal and Catalog solution, which is built on Service Portal. It's inexpensive, has been in continuous development now for 4 years, and it has 15 distinct landing pages which make up a complete end-to-end customer experience. Avoiding wrong motives means building from the customer in rather than IT out, even if one of your key goals is to offload IT work, which it should be. It can't happen unless the customers use the solution. Build deep and wide enough for a consistent customer experience. If customers like it and use it, then self-service works and IT's workload can go down. One of the principles we use: give the customer what they want to get what IT needs. As mentioned, there are powerful customer-centric principles at work in every modern customer experience company, like Amazon, Zappos, Airbnb, and many others. Not only that, but most of us are using them every day, and we have live-fire demos we can use 24/7 that allow us to see these best practices in production. But this kind of innovation isn't new. Over 100 years ago, cars were individually hand-built, only affordable for the very rich. There was no concept of a production line in the auto industry, but Henry Ford saw one at work in a beef butchering facility where the beef carcass came to the butchers on chains and hooks, and he directly adopted the idea to create the modern assembly line. Ask yourself this: how much of what we do in IT is like the custom car business of a century ago? We have to go outside of IT for these best practices. While lots of people will be involved in building your customer experience, the customer wants and expects a consistent look and feel. To achieve this, we need to get everyone on the same page. It is helpful to create a common design guide and share it for use for anyone who's going to be working in this area with you. Along with that, it's also useful to have some reference sites identified that you admire as guiding lights, look, feel, and practices that you would like to mimic. When we are the seller, it's hard to think like the buyer. The same is true for provider and customer. When you get stuck, go to your favorite modern customer experience and be the customer for a few minutes. It helps reframe your thinking and will often solve the problem you were struggling with. Have you ever seen a 2-page PDF with 50 fields at the bottom to fill out? For many, this has been passed off as IT customer-facing self-service. Now I ask, would you use it? I think the answer is no. And neither will your customers. We work for the customer, not vice versa. So let's not ask them to do our work by building unintelligent forms or asking for information we can get elsewhere. IT cultural conflict is and will remain a big challenge. Many IT organizations act as if there isn't a customer on the other end of the conversation, or worse, they may treat the customer with disdain. We've got to take that head on, and it's not very easy. For more information on this topic, I recommend you take a look at the recorded webinar I referenced here at the bottom, How to Deliver an Amazon-like Customer Experience. Poor navigation kills more service portal and catalog efforts than anything else. If a customer comes in, can't find what they want, gets confused, they leave, and they don't come back. Anyone can organize and manage 10 services they create and provide. But what about 50, 100, or even 500? And what if a dozen different parts of IT each want to create and publish their own services? Now let's add HR, facilities, legal, and contracts to the mix. And what if each names their services whatever they want and wants their service portal, to have the look and feel they know their customers want? Because that's what's happening. Now you be the customer. You use Amazon and Airbnb. What if buying shoes was a great experience, but buying a stereo was terrible? Or on Airbnb, the experience for renting a beach house in North Carolina was entirely different than renting a mountain house in South Carolina. Would you say for Amazon and Airbnb, sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad? No, not likely. You would say it's lousy, and you would try to avoid using it again, if at all possible. When people have large numbers of things to organize and manage, they generally use some sort of a taxonomy. Now, ITIL, which we rely on a lot, doesn't provide any guidance on taxonomies, so we had to look outside of IT. The taxonomy is the practice and science of classifying things. A numbered list is actually a type of taxonomy, but it isn't very good for understanding hundreds of things. We need a service taxonomy, or a logical, repeatable way to classify the services we offer, as well as the ones we might want to offer. The taxonomy of the animal kingdom, here at the top, is a pretty good type of taxonomy model for IT services, because the classification goes from very broad to specific, from millions to few. The 140-year-old Dewey Decimal System is another excellent taxonomy example, in use at over 250,000 libraries today. It organizes the known knowledge of the world in a set of 4 tenths. Could you imagine trying to find a book or managing a library without it? Most taxonomies organize things into logical categories, groups, and subgroups as the classification gets more specific. The best type of taxonomy for you is the type that best reflects what you need to do in creating and managing the services you want to offer. At the highest level, the taxonomy, we call it here a framework, the taxonomy framework, should capture the broadest view of what you see as potentially within the scope of your effort. Of course, the taxonomy can be grown or shrunk later. It's never truly locked down, but it's easier to start with a broad view as there is no downside to it. You don't have to use all of it right away, and you'll minimize any reclassification efforts downstream that could come from changing the taxonomy. The parts of the taxonomy are meant to be the parts of a whole. Here's a simple example of a broad framework which covers line of business services facing customers or partners, shared services facing employees, and two types of IT service categories. We break these out because a lot of work is done in IT. Note, of course, that IT really is a shared service along with HR, legal, facilities, and the other shared services that face employees. While it is one taxonomy, it can have as many sub-taxonomies, or what we call apertures, as it makes sense to the customers of any given area. Amazon has hundreds of stores, but only one taxonomy. We use a visual mind mapping technology called XMind when we do this sort of taxonomy work. It's powerful, easy to use, and very inexpensive. Our standard taxonomy model was distilled from over 30 different examples, has been developed over the past 4 years, and refined in over 40 engagements to date. It has over 600 elements, considers both the customers and the provider's needs, and we found that usually 70 to 80% of it is applicable in any given customer, which actually can save us a ton of time and confusion. It can be purchased outright for $7,500, or it's included at no cost in our upfront strategy and roadmap kinds of engagements. Unless you have really good enterprise-wide roles definitions to work from, it is usually smart to break IT services into two groups: customer-facing and internal IT, or more simply put, the people that don't speak IT and the people that do speak IT. You don't have to follow this confusion, but when these are mixed together, it can confuse everyone. Any section of a taxonomy is targeted at a particular customer set, and since we want to think like the customer, then the labels in that section should be in the customer's language, not the provider's. If you look at the two categories above, you can see the difference in the labels for the two groups. But the framework is also for the providers. It's the way the providers can understand the breadth and depth of services and combinations of services offered. If you have 300 services, could you understand a numbered or alphabetical list of them? No, it would be too hard. It is important to clearly understand the difference between a service and a request, and we find this to be one of the most common misunderstandings that's out there. Most of our customers have request catalogs, not service catalogs, and many thousands of requests which are redundant, impossible to organize and manage, and truly impossible for the customers to wade through. And this is actually like putting the cart before the horse. It would be like going to Amazon and reviewing the purchase request process, and then say, hey, I like the way that works, now let me go find something to buy. It's backward. So let's clear this up. A request from a user is for something to be provided. A request is transactional. Once it's completed, it's done. And as such, it usually only carries a completion goal, such as this will be done within 2 days. Asking for access to an application is a request. A service, though, is durable over time and ongoing. As such, it has goals or SLAs around hours of performance, hours of service, availability, availability, customer support, restoration of service, those kinds of things. Providing Oracle for Windows as a service is a service. Last, all requests are actually hanging off of some service and are essentially some form of add, change, or remove, which we all know a fair amount about. There are only a handful of actual request types. The good news is that this can make your life much easier if you've struggled trying to manage a massive request catalog. A service, rather than request catalog, has a smaller number of things to manage, which are the services, and is actually much more intuitive for your customers. So it's common to find every provider of services wanting their own portal and associated taxonomy, HR, IT, facilities, etc. In fact, that's very common. Creating a single broad taxonomy early on is critical. As mentioned, at the highest level, the framework should capture your broadest view. It is completely fine to create these multiple different sub-taxonomies inside a single broad taxonomy. For example, the category HR would have a sub-service taxonomy with services that are logically seen as HR services in the eyes of the customer. The same would be true for customer-facing IT services. A single taxonomy along with a single service catalog with subcatalogs gives us the ability to apply effective governance, giving providers some necessary latitude to serve their customers while also being able to present a consistent, high-quality, enterprise-wide portfolio of services to our customers. Remembering the Amazon and Airbnb examples, the customers will accept nothing less. Now, this is a common question asked at our workshops. How do customers navigate? Some feel everything should be search-based only, and would make it more simple, like Google. Others feel it should be by the organized structure only. Truth is, it is a balance and combination of the two. Here, I did a search on Zappos for women's dress shoes because I'm bold enough to shop for my wife in this area. And it found 3,100, bold or foolish enough, I should probably amend that. And it found 3,144 items. Well, there's no way I could ever understand that. So Zappos shares their taxonomy structure with me in the sidebar, so I can further refine my search. Another benefit, it actually helps me to think, and it kind of leads me along. If I had to put in all the parameters I want, like shoe size and heel size, color, material, manufacturer, it would be frustrating. It'd be too much work, so I wouldn't do it. When I meet with a new customer and they tell me they have their taxonomy fully documented, I am sure of one thing, that it's a provider's view in the provider's language. While this is useful because it identifies all the potential services they have, we actually have to start fresh with the questions, how would the customer expect to see this organized, and what labels would they expect to see? It sounds simple, but that can be pretty tough. The taxonomy is not a mapping of the organization structure. It's a functional view of services, organized and labeled as the customer of that service would expect to see it. Now, while 80% of the services in HR might be provided by the HR department, what is shown in that section of the taxonomy are the services that the customer expects to see. Here's an example. If a customer clicks on training under HR, would they expect to see only training related to becoming an HR admin? Or would they expect to see all the training offered to the employees, including things like IT training? Taking ownership of a section in the taxonomy begins a mentality of, this is ours, we know what these customers want, and we will build that for them ourselves. This just builds silo walls even higher, making the customer experience increasingly fragmented and inconsistent. So we want to be aware and on guard for that because it can start very simply. More information on this topic, I recommend you take a look at the recorded webinar reference here, Best Practice for Organizing Services in Your Service Catalog. Now we'll take a look into what services are and how we might go about making them. Per IDLE, good definition, a service is something of value you do for someone, and all they have to do is receive it. They don't take the risk or are involved in delivery. For example, when you hire someone to cut your lawn, you don't take turns with them on the mower, and if the mower breaks, you don't make a run for parts. Proper service design process begins with the three constituents of a service: the customer, the providers, and the managers. All must be involved and have their needs met to create any truly viable service. The customer wants an excellent customer experience, and to deliver that, we must think like the customer and design from the customer in, not IT out, or they'll reject it. The provider wants execution effectiveness, and if we don't build in a way that it makes them more efficient and effective, then they won't support the change with the customers and will work around the system. Now, they won't do that because they're bad people. They're going to do it because they see that we've actually slowed down their ability to deliver customer service. The manager wants governance and accountability. They want the same thing the providers want, but they want it on a broader scale. They want it across the enterprise, because without this, we cannot build and deliver all of our services consistently with high quality. A good, consistent service design process is critical for customer satisfaction, simplicity, and quality. Here we have an IT service where we provide business analytics. This is the view that the customer has of it. There's a brief description of the service offered, so if I'm the customer, I can decide if this is what I'm looking for. I can see that Don Goodliff is the service owner. I need to contact someone. And I can see that it's rated 3 out of 5 stars for quality. I can click on 3 different requests, items, if I want to take an action. And if I need further detail to make a decision, I can click on the tabs at the bottom. A good service design goal is to provide enough information so a customer can decide on their own what they need to do and then be able to take action. While this isn't always possible, it is what we should aim for. We call this customer view a service tombstone because it summarizes what lies below. As part of the overall service design process, here are the high-level steps we take to build an individual service to the point where it's ready to be put into production or put into service. We go from how it will be presented to the customer, to what is included, to how we deliver it behind the scenes, to how we get feedback, to how we build it for manageability. ServiceNow Service Portal gives you the ability to create new requests and supporting workflows easily and quickly. It's powerful. But that can also create a problem. You can build hundreds of requests and services, all with a unique look and feel, pretty fast. Your customers won't like that. We've already talked about that. As customers at Amazon, for example, we love the fact that it's consistent end-to-end customer experience every single time. In fact, we're so used to using it that we don't even have to think about it to use it. It's effectively operating in our hands, as it were, as a musician would describe it. Your customers will expect a consistent customer experience. So we extend Service Portal with a consistent service design process, which then flows right into a consistent and complete service and request presentation your customers see. If we're going to build a consistent service design process, we must get it in use across IT and beyond, otherwise what's the point? That means we want people from all across the organization to imagine and build the services they want to offer. And who better to do so, since these are the people who understand the services they're delivering. In order to do this, we must give them the process and enable their learning and their use of it. This can be accomplished through effective service governance and applying something like an underwriter's laboratory-like approach. We provide the tools and guidance on how to create a draft service. Then once it's drafted, it is submitted for our review. We provide feedback on what still needs to be done for it to be compliant. Once it's corrected, the service is given our UL-like seal of approval and promoted to the service portal and catalog. While very effective, this approach to governance is also very lightweight. It's a lot less work for the service governance or service management or service ownership team. Why is this so important? Because poor, inconsistent services reflect poorly on us, not the people who created them, because we're the owners of the service portal and catalog. Getting and keeping clarity on that topic, service versus request, will keep us aligned with the customer's thinking, making it easier to build services customers like and make our portal and catalog much less complex. If some is good, more is better, and 10 times more is IT. We already talked a little bit about that, but we're good at doing lots of stuff fast. but often without much forethought. If we do this with building services, we'll get a whole lot of these custom, or what we call rifle shot services. They'll be inconsistent, ungovernable, and as a group, incomprehensible to our customers. So we want to govern ourselves. We want to hold back on that activity. Consistent service design yields consistent customer experience. That is very predictable. Without this kind of governance, Service Portal and Catalog is an exercise in customer frustration. For more information on this topic, I recommend you take a look at the webinar reference below there, 5 Keys to Good Service Design. Okay, so I squeezed in a bonus topic today, and I wanted to touch briefly on the role of the service owner. The service owners are the superheroes of IT in the customer's eyes. Today, most of us have technical delivery managers rather than true service owners in IT. Excuse me. The role of the service owner is to be accountable for managing a service throughout its full useful life cycle. The role of a technical delivery manager, what most do today, is much more limited in scope with an inward focus on execution, not providing what the customer needs. You can see that as a service owner, to do your job, you have a much larger number of questions you need answers to than you do as a technical delivery manager. Truthfully, many of us aren't even thinking about a lot of these questions today. These questions arise or begin to arise when we truly own the service and see it from the customer's eyes. Innovative IT organizations are beginning to get this, that their value is in delivering what the customer needs and wants in a high-quality experience, meeting customer expectations. But they don't actually have to provide the technology solution themselves, because the customer doesn't care about that. They only care about the functionality, not who provides it. This in turn is leading IT to focus on true services rather than technical outcomes, which is fueling the emergence of this role of the service owner, someone who owns the outcome the customer really wants from end to end. And here's a picture of that same idea, and we're going to look at alignment that comes with it. Service owners are the jewels in the watch that begin to change IT by helping align their goals with the customer's goals. As an example, every service we deliver is made up of lots of little services. And even though one person, let's say John Smith, is the service owner and owns the big service, there are lots of little services being combined from different parts of IT to make up the big service. This is part of what scares John as a service owner, because he doesn't control those people. They don't actually work for him. So how can he possibly be successful? He begins explaining to everyone delivering services to him how important they are, how they fit into the big scheme, and what the customer really wants. John, by doing so, creates meaningful mission alignment, because just mechanically doing a task is not very fulfilling. But helping a customer as part of a team, that's very different. And every day, John will work with everyone, giving feedback, helping them improve, streamlining, and encouraging the effort, making sure that they see their part in the big picture. I think we all have a pretty good idea of what a technical manager's role and daily activities are. Beyond that, we see, at Evergreen, we see 3 additional primary service owner roles: that of a product line manager, a service quality manager, and a team manager. While we don't have time to dive into them in detail today, if you're interested in these different roles, I recommend that you take a look at the recorded webinar referenced below, A Day in the Life of a Services Owner. Last, we can help our service owners to better manage their team and their interactions and the linkage to the customer with a service owner's dashboard. Here's a quick look at the dashboard, of the service owner's dashboard that we built into our Service Portal and Catalog solution. It includes information on customer satisfaction, quality, availability, and delivery. As the service owner, I can easily see who my customers are and what they're asking for. I can also see my sub-service providers and how they are performing for me, the status of their OLAs and SLAs against our customer commitments, open incidents and requests, quality of service, on and on. A good service owner's dashboard can make it easier for people to understand and embrace the role of a service owner. Okay, so that's all I have for our presentation today. I'm going to turn it over to Jeff to demonstrate some of these concepts in our Service Portal and Catalog solution.
As always, thank you, Don. All right, so I'm going to start kind of from a portal perspective, and so this is self-service portal. This is ServiceNow Service Portal application with a portal skin built on top of it, and this is where our consumers can go to get information about our services. They can obviously submit service requests, track the status of those. They can also, this is also a vehicle to push information to our consumers. So you'll see things like announcements over here, right? Outage information pushed. And if I look at the kind of experience of this portal, kind of starting at the top, my first place to come to is the menu is a quick place to come to my quick common request that I may submit. So this might be the first place I go, run searches I've run before, order things I've ordered before. Kind of secondarily, I've got a place where I can start a search. Right, so as I start to search for things, I maybe find a match to some key terms and ultimately find what I'm looking for. I do want to kind of focus in on, for demo purposes today, kind of a lot of the topics that Don hit on in terms of presenting our services and service information and then requesting actions from there. And again, some of the purpose for displaying what are our services is, one, to provide kind of transparency and clarify what consumers expect from these services. But also, we do want to put these in, labels that the customers can understand and kind of communicate what we provide to them in terms that they'll be able to digest and visualize themselves. One of the first things you'll kind of see kind of presented here is suggestions from me. This is taking things that are personalized for me based off of services I actively use, things I've recently viewed, favorites, things I've ordered recently. Different factors can drive kind of what shows up in my suggestions from me. If I don't want to see suggestions, I can kind of push those to the side and kind of browse through my different catalogs and ultimately our different service category areas. As I drill in, I'm going to kind of go down the tree here. I want to find, let's say for example, my laptop's coming up for refresh, and so I kind of want to see what are my options in terms of getting assistance from my laptop, what can I expect from this, and ultimately can I get that new laptop ASAP. So I can come to a page, this is, as Don mentioned, is kind of our service Tombstone kind of page. So providing, in this case, a pretty limited set of information about the service, but I'm providing who owns it, who manages it, some basic information about the services, and different offerings that are provided as part of this service and what you can expect. And I can see that I'm actively kind of part of this standard laptop support, so I can kind of see what I get. And I do want to focus in on some of the areas that where based off of the service I can take action. So I have a Forms tab where I can perform different actions, like maybe I want to request to borrow a new PC, so I can be presented a form specific for that. You'll see forms to the right over here for submitting feedback, submitting ideas to make the service better, or maybe since I might be having trouble with my laptop, I can come straight here and submit a help or an incident request in regards to my machine in this particular service. But in my scenario, I do want to explore getting a replacement for my current laptop, so I'm going to see this refresh my computer option. And this one's a little more of a wizard-driven kind of model of kind of walking me through the process. First of all, checking that I am eligible for getting a replacement, so I can kind of start that process. And now I'm provided kind of a simplified list of things that I can choose from. Instead of being overwhelmed with whatever possible model I want to fill in or fill in a description of what I need, I'm presented choices. Right? So do I need a new laptop for business purposes, or do I need it for kind of development purposes? And these are my different kind of choices based off of that. I'm going to gravitate to the Apple machine, so I'll select that. And then we're also kind of performing a couple just kind of checks and balances, making sure that I've read our policies. I've gotten kind of approval for the cost of this particular piece of equipment that I'm going to be refreshing, and then I'm all kind of good to go with my particular order. All right, so I can submit that. And then providing kind of confirmation, right? So I've got a ticket number that I can track, but we're also clarifying some additional details as part of this process of here's how I can expect to get files transferred to me, here's how applications are going to be handled on my behalf, here's how quickly I can expect to get this new equipment, right? And then if I want to inquire to see how it's progressing, I've got a track option which will take me to my status page, which if you were looking closely, you would also notice that it also showed up in my active stream of tickets over here on the right as well. All right, and so I can see this is currently awaiting approval. So I'll just quickly show you kind of what happens on the back end of this request, and then we'll move on to a different example. So basically, this particular request, first of all, has an approval aspect that's kind of noted through that output of the portal. And so my manager needs to approve this. So Don, being the nice guy that he is, approves my request. And then kind of where it goes next, and again, I'm not going to go through the full steps of this, but I'll just kind of show you kind of the quick, short answer of kind of how this process would flow, is it first goes to kind of a sourcing group as a task to determine how to source this particular request. In this case, we're dealing with equipment. So there's really two choices here. If we have stock, we want to fulfill it from our stock room. And kind of ultimately, when you're having high order items, like if we're doing a lot of these laptop replacements, we would like to have some stock on hand to service this. But in this particular case, there isn't any stock on hand that services my location and my needs. So really the only option in this scenario is really to go and actually buy something directly from one of our available vendors, which at this point we have one vendor, one quantity, and then where we're going to deliver it to is going to be one of our stock rooms. So then I can submit this, and then we basically started a purchasing process. And long story short, the process of this is the purchase order would go through an approval, receiving, or approval, order, receiving kind of flow, and then ultimately it would be delivered to me. There'd be some additional tasks on the back end to configure it and hand it off to me for use. So that's kind of that example. And I do want to, so that's kind of the laptop support service kind of model and those requests and actions. I want to show you a little bit of kind of behind that service tombstone, kind of how we set those records up. So I'm going to create a new service just so you can kind of see the data inputs of this. I'm going to go to Business Services and create a new service. And this I'm going to call Meeting Collaboration, if I can spell. And kind of powered by this, we have a couple applications we're using, Skype and Zoom. So I'm going to put those as alias just in case someone searches for Skype or Zoom. Those will kind of it'll also show Meeting Collaboration as a response. Owned by Alice Smith. We'll say it's managed by Don Goodliff, and it's part of our IT department. And then we're going to basically charge this kind of with monthly allocations. Don mentioned kind of a taxonomy. Here's where we're going to see some of those taxonomy kind of components kind of show up here, right? So I can drill into my different categories. I'm going to put this under communications and collaboration, and I'll just say version 1.2, give it a primary support group, and then I'm just going to paste some additional descriptive information in here just so there's a little more meat to this guy. And same for at-a-glance information. I've got some text I'll throw into here for this. It should be noted as you look at this, this can take HTML, so if there's embedded images, embedded videos, links out to other systems, all that can be done as part of this descriptive information we want to communicate. Let's say this is available to a couple different departments like finance, customer service, and IT. And then lastly, just to kind of fill out the details of this service, I'm going to give it a picture here. And I can find my picture I want to put here. Just a meeting collaboration kind of icon to attach to this particular service. All right. So if you look down below, and here you'll also see there's some additional tabs that you can fill out. And I do want to fill out the service offerings, though in lieu of time, I've already created these. I'm just going to link these offerings to my newly created service here. And I'll do this, link those. And basically what I've got here is kind of two offerings. One is we can do collaboration through the use of our Skype software, which is pretty inexpensive. Here's its availability, resolution, and response time type of targets. Here's some of the features you get as part of that service. Here's some of the things you don't get as part of that service. And then we have kind of a more robust feature offering, which costs a little more on a monthly allocation basis for using our technology of Zoom. Commitments are relatively the same in terms of availability and resolution. But some of the feature sets of what you get as far as the service and what you don't get kind of are different from that perspective. All right, so that's the offerings. The other thing I want to show on this particular request is, or on this service, other forms of actions that can be made. So first of all, there's a selection here. Do we allow people to kind of request access to this particular service? And if so, is there a specific item that we use to request access, or do we kind of use a standard kind of defined workflow and item that we have here? The other field is I can define a kind of fulfillment workflow that would be unique to requesting access to the service. I'm going to leave these blank, but just wanted to highlight that this is where if I have something unique about gaining access to meeting collaboration, that can be defined as its own separate kind of fulfillment workflow or separate item to request. And also kind of adjust the label, so I can do something like request access to meeting collaboration. And then the other thing I want to highlight is, so then if I want to list other things of actions that can be requested, I can define them here. So I can do things like maybe I want there to be an action related to this to schedule a webinar event. Maybe I want people to be able to ask a question. Right, and maybe I've also got another option out here for a Skype for business number kind of option. So I can define the specific actions or specific forms or request items that can be triggered or requested in context of the service when they're looking at details about meeting collaboration or some of the actions they can perform. The other way I can do this, just to highlight, I'll just fill this one of these in here, is you'll notice when I fill in this query component here, it hides that other list that I just defined. So the other way I can define this is more of a filter or dynamic-based query, which is really defining kind of a predefined filter that will dynamically go out and look at our current list of catalog items and pull back based off of some criteria. I'm going to blank this out in this case, but I just want to highlight that that's an option here as well. All right, so my service has been defined. The other thing I do want to just kind of quickly show here too is any of these individual request items also have their own kind of place or ways to define them. So there's two ways you can define these catalog items. You can go directly as an administrator and create the catalog items, but there's also a utility in ServiceNow called the item designer where you can go through and say create new, kind of walk you through that process of creating an item. So for example, this schedule a webinar event I already created, put in some details around here's what kind of the information we show about scheduling a webinar event, some details behind this, some of the inputs or questions that we need to have answered from our consumers. Right, so in this case, we're asking for when do you want this event to happen, who do you want to invite, summary of your event. And then we define some workflow kind of steps as part of this. Now, one thing I'll highlight here too is some of these workflow steps can also be set up where you can define conditionals. So I can say, in this case, I only want this particular approval to happen if the input was this is a 90-minute event. So we need some special approval for events that go 90 minutes long. And there's some tasks that we're defining here, right? So one, a task to confirm a webinar event, another task to send out calendar entries to the recipients, and then one to execute that, facilitate that particular webinar. So that's kind of the definition of these item designer kind of records that go into it. All right, so now that I've created my service, let's go back to browsing services. And I want to show you what we just created. So I'll just quickly go here. Let's do a search for meeting collaboration. Newly created service record. So our tombstone looks like this, right? So it shows some information about our service, our alias information, version information. Now you may wonder, I'm already pre-subscribed to this. Well, part of that is when I set up the offerings, that you can set up the offerings to be set up where you can have your subscriptions be tied to departments, groups, locations, or other kind of affiliations. Basically, I'm saying that anyone who's in IT or in a certain department already got this kind of offering as part of their service, which is kind of why I'm pre-subscribed to this. Other worth noting, I didn't highlight before, but also there's some tabs here related to service status and health. Right, here's my forms to submit things like my webinar event request, kind of hang off this particular service, where I can fill in those different questions, drive that workflow. And there is also an area where you can see kind of the metrics of how well it's actually delivered to those availability, resolution, and response kind of targets. All right, so quickly I'll just go request access to just show you this process. Right, so in this case, I can't request access to Skype as a service offering because I've already got that in my repository. So when I try to select it, it basically is saying you're already there. But I can add this offering to my kind of catalog, fill in some additional details, submit my request, and then I've got a new request out here that I can track the progress of. And in this case, it kind of goes through a pretty simple process here of requesting approval from the service owner, which I'm over here logged in as the service owner. Right, so they would have their list of approvals. So I was going to say the section over here on the site. So as you can see on the tab here, the items to approve, right? So she can go and approve this particular request. And then as it progresses, similarly to my other request that I submitted, oops, I didn't put the number in right. Let me copy that correctly. Ticket number. So I'll quickly show you how this flows. So this is where, based off that service access, if we had that specific workflow defined for the service, it would go off and spawn that, and the unique activities to fulfill gaining access to this service would be performed as part of that workflow. But in this case, it wasn't defined, so we're just kind of kicking off a fulfillment task that gets routed to the primary support group for that service, which is kind of defined here as a catalog task. And the main thing I wanted to kind of show on the back end of this is once it's been set up, I've gained access, a couple things happen on the back end of this process. One, it would mark me as being tied to that other offering, as being subscribed to it. It would also add me to any notifications related to outages and health. And then also, it would also, in this case, since I'm being introduced to something new as a part of a service offering, it's also going to seek some feedback from me in the form of a survey. So, and I don't have to do this right away, but it's kind of due in, say, a 30-day period, right, to say, am I happy with this service? Works great so far. Right, so I can share some information with the service owner. And then the last thing I'll hit on here before I close it out is from the service owner side, as Don mentioned, they have their own kind of view as well. So first of all, one thing, the service owner will get notifications if there's, say, an outage, key events. In this case, if there's a new subscriber or new, say, negative feedback came in, they would get notifications of that. And their view, when they click on things in context of their service, kind of takes them to more of a dashboard view, which is focused on certain current activities that are related to their service. So if there's open incidents that are impacting their service, if there's open requests impacting their service, they would see those, right? Any health and status information, feedback, and then ultimately focusing on some of the metrics and delivering to those commitments that they may have. So that covers what I wanted to hit on today. Hope this was helpful in seeing kind of how ServiceNow and the Service Portal can kind of fit some of those topics covered.
All right, thank you, Jeff. As usual, the best way for me to find out what you've been working on is to listen when you present on the webinar, and it also answered the question why you've ordered 5 new PCs in the last 3 weeks. Okay. So if you have found any of this of interest, here are some possible next steps. If you're at all interested in our advanced self-service portal and catalog, like I said, it's relatively inexpensive. It's the most viewed and purchased app on the ServiceNow store, which is kind of cool. It is available as a fully functioning self-service demo, and you can get it either from our website, just following the links, or you can download your own version, a demo version from the ServiceNow store. There are over 1,000 people who've signed up, and I think they all rely on it every day. It's just incredible. Just kidding. Perhaps you're interested in establishing a better service catalog direction and roadmap. Maybe take a deeper look at our service catalog strategy and roadmap offering. It delivers in a couple of weeks. It's only $17,500, and we guarantee your satisfaction with it. Last but not least, if you are interested in a better way to meet your ServiceNow demand, please check out our really entirely new way of delivering services with Evergreen Evolve. So if we have any questions, Steph, we're open for those for the few minutes we have left.
We do, and Jeff, so far they appear to all be for you.
Shocking.
Let's see. And Jeff, it says, you created a very awesome animation for your widget. What plugins are you using?
So a couple of things. Don mentioned the slide before. So we do have an application in the store. So a lot of the portal that I was showing has widgets that were part of our application that we've authored and created and pushed to the ServiceNow store. Behind that, there are some plugins that we do leverage, the service portfolio plugins for those definitions of your service offerings, and some of that definition information. We do use things like the task outage plugin for linking outages and outage information to the service health pages. But a lot of the widgets are things that we've created using the Service Portal toolkit and kind of, and then packaged in different themes that we can present for consumption through that portal.
Okay, great. Jeff, another one for you. Is it recommended for consumers to start at the service page to make all requests?
I'd be interested if Don wants to weigh in on this too. But so I would say, in general, we're seeing more and more of our customers kind of move in that direction. We're kind of putting the service at the center of the experience. And Don mentioned like Amazon and Airbnb. And I think if you think of Amazon, you oftentimes start at going to a product, and then from there, you learn about the product, and then you see if you can need assistance, see reviews, see feedback, and then ultimately, perform some actions like ordering the product or requesting an enhancement or submitting an issue or something of that nature, right? So I do think within our portal experience, we have set up different use cases where you can see either, when you're requesting things, see what the service is that's behind that, or if you're at the service level, seeing what the requests are. So I think you can kind of handle both ways, but we are starting to see more people go kind of service-centric.
Yeah, from our design perspective, since the service is the center of what's happening in the requests or actions or any sort of request against the service, it's a service-centric design. So having a totally distinct request portal and a service catalog to us doesn't make a lot of sense. It's confusing. And even if you take it a step further, which is kind of cool, once there's a service owner that's really taken over the ownership of the service becomes like a small town grocer, that the relationship can be developed between the customer and the service owner. And then the other parts of the organization that are also providers or involved in that interaction. So it's almost like a microcosm of interaction. It becomes the home place for activity around that service. So quality, customer interaction, all those things go up, and a sense of ownership comes out of it. So it's a knowledge goes there, manuals, frequent training materials, all these things that are relevant to that service can then find a place on that home page in effect. And so it really changes things, and it makes it a lot easier for people to find things. There's a location where the stuff comes together.
Great. Another one, Jeff. In the computer refresh demo example, would the choices differ for one user versus another?
So I think depending on the size of the organization, I think the answer is yes. My demo, I had kind of 5 different choices of laptops to choose from. Though I imagine in a large organization, the variety of different needs is probably going to be to lead to a bigger number of choices. I would say the goal, however, is to try to keep, and I think Don mentioned this a little bit, to keep kind of choice simplification. So only present kind of a limited number of choices that are relevant to the user. So don't give them a full 100 of models to choose from, right? But rather what are the 5 top models that would be ideal for that consumer to select from.
Jeff, we've got a question came in. I think it's a follow-up question to the question about the widgets, and he's asking how are the graphics of the report created? What external dependencies are you using? Charts, JS,
yes. The report part is talking about the service owner dashboard or the metrics tab on the service page, and those are using. It's all AngularJS, and it's using kind of, I think it is using Chart.js as the kind of underlying library for rendering the actual charts. The data itself comes from I mentioned the service portfolio plugin, and the service offerings collect kind of how well those offerings are being delivered to those targets. So the data itself is kind of out of the box service now, but we're using the widgets and I think Chart.js for actually building the reports for consumption.
Okay, great. And another question, does any part of the solution rely on performance analytics?
No. The majority of our customers that we've kind of worked with aren't licensed for performance analytics, so we didn't build it to be dependent on it. Though I would say there is certainly value that can be gained from performance analytics in terms of the real value, I think, of performance analytics is the trending aspects of it, right? How well have things been progressing or moving, and what trends can you expect going forward? So I think there would be a value add with performance analytics, but we're not tied to it, no.
Okay, great. And Jeff, also wanted to clarify, what version of ServiceNow are you presenting on?
The one I was showing today is Jakarta, though we do have some Kingston versions that we're working on right now.
Okay, great. And another one for you, Jeff. In the demo, were the items created in the item designer created by business users, or would these be created by a ServiceNow administrator?
So good question, and Don kind of hit on this a little bit with kind of the UL framework kind of thing. So I think the item designer application, I guess for those who aren't familiar with it, was kind of built in ServiceNow's kind of citizen developer kind of theme and mindset. So they were targeting like non-system administrators to go out there and create items and publish them kind of without having to really know the ServiceNow toolkit or be technical developers. I would say, however, we don't necessarily recommend opening your catalog up to the business to just create all these items on their own and publish them out to the masses, but rather, kind of follow like what Don mentioned, having some sort of governance process there, right? Maybe you let the business come in and draft the items, define the information, but there's some review, acceptance, and publishing kind of process to ensure that we're pushing kind of to our standards to our consumers.
Okay, great. I believe I've got all the questions. If not, if I missed you, please email them to marketing@evergreensys.com, and I'll make sure that we get an answer back to you from Jeff or Don. You will receive an email from ReadyTalk with the recording link and the slides. We thank you for joining us. Remind you to visit the resources page at evergreensys.com. You'll find past webinar recordings there, as well as announcements for all our upcoming webinars and workshops. Thanks, and we'll talk to you soon.